welcome back to the Raj and Drew Show for Entrepreneurs. I am Drew Jackson, and I am joined by my great friend, Raj. Raj, how you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Drew. Thank you very much. How are you?
Wonderful. It's a beautiful spring day as we record this, and we are going to talk about my favorite subject, which is the subject of leadership. And you've got some leadership practices for maximum impact. And these are really geared towards the entrepreneur. How can the entrepreneur lead their organization? What are the practices? What are those habits, disciplines, whatever you want to call them? We're calling them practices for maximum impact within your organization. Let me ask you this, Raj, before we jump in. Will these practices, I know the first one, so I'm kind of cheating here. I know the first one, and I love the word influence. When we talk about influence, influence can work within an organization and outside of the organization to have an impact. So when we talk about these leadership practices for maximum impact, will a lot of these skills work internally, but also externally?
Yes, it will work for all the stakeholders. That's the reason why I use the word stakeholders, because it can be internally our employees, it can be our customers, it can be our suppliers, it can be our consultants, advisors, whoever it is. So all the stakeholders, they need to influence them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's
yeah, I love it. And I mean, the stakeholder idea and the concept, even like you said, it goes beyond the organization out into the community. And these people that you have impact or you have influence with, I think you mentioned a few weeks ago in another podcast that you've seen people who have built relationships with sharp people in the community that ultimately came and worked for them and became a part of their organization.
Yes. And one of the biggest thing I have noticed even from my GE days was like the United Way golf tournament, basically the day of habitat, going back and giving to the community. This is where a lot of relationships always form. Because I remember hiring one MBA student who was as part of the habitat. I really liked him, started talking to him. We spent 3 hours talking while painting a house.
Wow.
And 3 months later, he was working for me in the office because I really liked him. When the opening came up, I just called him up and basically said, hey, do you want to work? And he was so excited and he came and worked for me.
That's awesome. Habitat for Humanity. What an awesome organization. I was able to do some work with them. And at the time, I imagine it's still the same thing. They're the largest home builder in the world. Built more homes than any other organization. It's a nonprofit. And talk about influence. I mean, I love the story. This is totally a side note, but I'll jump into it for a second.
Sure.
You know, President Jimmy Carter made a much greater impact outside of his presidency with Habitat for Humanity than he ever did with his presidency. And I mean, I think anybody would say that he's just had a 40 year run with Habitat for Humanity, really put them on the map. They're a very small fledgling nonprofit. He came on the scene, volunteered, showed up, actually held a hammer and worked and led the nation and ultimately the world in this amazing idea and concept of giving people the dignity of owning a home. And so such a cool thing. I think organizations that are participating in some sort of give back effort. I know I've got some friends with Linux and Linux air conditioning units. They do a Feel the Love campaign where local HVAC companies will install an HVAC unit in a needy person's home. And whether they're disabled or they're just lower income or something like that, they do that in their own community. And it's just a beautiful thing to see people use their resources in that way. And everybody feels better when they do that. It's a great thing. So,
GE in Connecticut, GE Capital was big. I participated that for 8 straight years, and it was just a blessing just to be part of it and see the faces, the kids smiling when their rooms are being built, see the old people really seeing that they have a warm, comfort place to live. I agree with you. It was just a blessing and an experience.
It is. Well, awesome. Well, that's not what we were going to talk about today, right? So let's jump in. I will not hold you back. Tell us, what are these leadership practices for maximum impact?
So if you really go back and look at it, there are really 7 different elements of part of the leadership practices. Okay. So this is more focused from an entrepreneur And this has been developed based on how I've been working with different people and seeing the successes of the small business, scaling their business, growing their business. And these were all the result of the best practices coming from them.
Okay.
So the first piece of it is, as an entrepreneur, or if you're working as a leader for an entrepreneur, your influencing skills are huge. That is very, very important. And there are 7 different elements within that positive impact. When you're trying to maximize and making a positive, there's 7 different elements.
Okay.
The first thing is the effectiveness of your communication. Are you really, really able to articulate your ideas very clearly? And when say communication, people think of communication only from a talking or communicating perspective, but listening is also part of your communication. Are you actively listening? Are you really responding in a way that you are building and fostering positive relationships? The communication piece becomes very important from that. The second part of it is emotional intelligence. We spoke about it in detail in one of the other podcasts, but here is they should be very, very highly emotional intelligent. What does it mean? They really need to have a very, very high self-awareness and self-control. Social awareness, understanding the people around them, and how do you go back and leverage that and use that to make a positive impact. The emotional intelligence piece of it becomes very, very important.
Yeah.
The third piece of it is networking. You were just talking about the community and stuff. For an entrepreneur to be successful, depending on the product and service, they'll be working with a lot of internal people. At the same time, they'll be working with their clients and customers and consultants and several other people. So they need to really learn how to network, make that positive impact on them. So that networking skills becomes very, very important. And that comes with building the relationships and everything else.
Yeah. Well, they say your network is your net worth, right?
Exactly. That is true. And that is where you can go back and look at entrepreneurs and their leaders, how much of a network they have developed, and their net worth and scaling and growing of the business is directly proportional to that.
Yeah.
And the next one, the fourth one, is authenticity. I mean, everything is driven from there. If you're not very authentic, if you're really not communicating your passion, if you're not communicating with your heart, eventually people will understand you are fake or you're just coming at it. It is almost what you call that snake oil salesperson.
Yeah.
So if
well, I was thinking about this morning. I was going on a bike ride this morning, and I was thinking about leaders I've worked with, that how I would put it, inauthentic is a great word. As I was thinking about it, it was lacking depth, right? A shallowness to the relationship. The nature of our relationship was this person had a vision, everybody else accomplishes their vision. And that's the extent of it. You know, it's just, there's no real relationship. It's just go out and do what I want you to do. And if you're not doing what I want you to do anymore, I have no use for you. And it's not a very fun way to do life. And I think authenticity plays into that as well. Just being authentically who you are, showing up in the workplace and saying, look, I'm really passionate about this thing or whatever. You know, I'm a dad. And so being a dad kind of factors into who I am. I'm goofy, you know, I'm not cool at all. And I don't mind making fun of myself. And that's okay. That's who I am. And my kids make fun of me all the time, right? So
oh yeah. Oh, I got 2 kids who always tell me and remind me where I came from.
Right.
I'm originally from India. I still have some of the British spellings and some of those things. Even after 32 years in the country, I sometimes still go back to my old habits. Old habits die hard, right?
Absolutely.
And they still keep on correcting me. I said, bring it on. I'm okay with it because I'm willing to listen and learn. I have no issues with that.
Hey, all I got to say is I'm grateful I live in a spell check world. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. And the fifth one is all about confidence.
Okay.
Basically, we need to have confidence in our ideas and abilities. We need to have confidence in our vision. We need to start believing in ourselves. And if we don't believe in ourselves, in our ideas and concepts, we can never inspire people around us, especially the early employees we are going to bring. They really need to go back and be inspired with us. Because when you are a small company and as an entrepreneur, the only thing you bring is the motivation piece of it and the dream or the futuristic thinking of there is a bright future and you want to be part of it. That's the reason why the confidence level becomes very, very important.
Yeah. Well, and if you don't have confidence, then you're going to attract people that feel sorry for you. They're helping you
Exactly.
because they feel sorry for
Yes.
you. And that's not necessarily going to be the caliber of person that you're looking for, or that only lasts so long. So,
Exactly.
you just got to factor those things in. Why would you want to follow somebody that doesn't know where they want to go or doesn't
Ex-
confidently express where they want to go? So yeah, 100%.
well,
That's perfect.
yeah. And the sixth one is persuasion.
Mm,
Basically, this is where present their ideas compellingly, being able to address any objections, being in a position to go back and overcome any challenges, obstacles, and still communicate what they need to communicate and make it very effective. The persuasion becomes very important. And last but not the least is the leadership, your favorite subject. Because strong leaders, they really inspire and motivate others to act.
yeah.
And they need to have the ability to set a vision. They got to be leading by example. They need to create a sense of purpose and direction.
Mm.
Anything you would like to add, Drew, because you are the expert on leadership and the author of the leadership book?
Well, I'll just go back to, and I say this all the time, I think communication is the foundation of all soft skills. And so you started out with influence, and that first piece being communication.
Yes.
Warren Buffett says that you'll increase your net worth by 50% if you take training on communication, learn to communicate better. I'm doing a leadership training tomorrow, and one of the components is communication. And there's a study, I think it's the Journal of Excellence. Don't quote me on that, but it is in my book. So I cited it there. But all that to say, it's effective communication is a lead indicator of financial success. And so in this 5-year study, they found that if the organizations that were effective in communication, it actually was that lead indicator, as I mentioned, of financial success. So it doesn't come afterwards. It's not that you're financially successful and then you get better at communication. It's the
No.
other way around. And so those are some compelling reasons. One of the wealthiest people in the world says do it. And then there's some hard research on it that says there's multiple reasons from a financial standpoint and turnover. Organizations that are effective in communication have less turnover. So there's multiple reasons why effective communication is that foundational piece. It's the starting point. If you don't know where you want to go, or you're not passionate about one of the items that Raj just mentioned, I would go to communication first, start there, and then every year probably revisit communication and try. We get to teach communication all the time. So we're always challenged, right? We're always
Yes.
researching, we're always looking, we're always trying to get better at our listening skills. And so, yeah, communication would
Yeah.
be the area I would just bang that drum.
Yeah. And I just want to add one example. You just reminded me of my first job in the US. I just finished my master's in industrial engineering and I went for my first job. I worked for 4 hours and it's a small family owned business. And basically the CEO of the company calls me to his office and he said, Raj, do you know everybody wants me to fire you? Because I was talking so much of technical jargon and everything else. I never communicated very well. And most of the people, I was the highest educated in the whole plant. So I was talking a lot of knowledge with good intentions, but I was only talking basically the logical stuff. I was not talking about anything else. I didn't take the time to understand the process or the people or anything. And I was so comfortable because the CEO recognized me and he said, you know what, that position, you will be in the wrong seat and it will create too many problems for you. And he gave me a seat and said, you know what, you will be with your knowledge and everything, you can become a quality expert. And that is how I got into quality from manufacturing.
Wow.
If the CEO would have not looked at me, I would have been fired on the first day, all because I did not know how to communicate. I did not have persuasion skills.
That is powerful. That's what a great person, the CEO, that they took the time to have that conversation with you.
Yes.
And be able to do that. That's just fantastic that they did that for your learning experience and
Yes.
also for their organization.
And I'm so glad that happened because I worked there for 3.5 years. And
Wow.
guess what? After that, working for 3.5 years is incredible. All my friends said, hey, they will really fire you pretty soon. Go find something else. But somehow I believed in the president of the CEO of the company. I worked with him. I learned a lot. He set my tone from an operations and quality perspective. He was the best boss I had to help me learn and move into that piece of it.
That's great. Awesome. Well, what is now with these practices? I know we've got 7 of them. Are they sequential, or are they, is it like last week when we talked about the business practices that there is kind of a sequence to them initially, but you're going to be going back and forth? Kind of how do we understand these?
So this one basically ties into the size of the business.
Okay.
Because some of the business, basically, when you're a startup business, some of those play a much bigger role. But once you have basically 30, 40 employees, that sequence changes. So right now, my recommendation would be is go with the flow of what we are doing.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so
unless we go ahead and unless we understand which stage they are, then we can go back and change a few things.
Okay. So we're going to go in order with
Yes.
and this is how someone should understand them and flush them out in your own business.
Exactly.
Perfect. All right. Step 2.
The step 2 is all about building and unifying vision. So this is influence, right? These are the general skills that every entrepreneur, every leader in their organization need to have. Now we are getting a little more clear about their impact on the business. So now they need to go back and build a unifying vision. If they don't have the unifying vision, then they cannot really go back and move everybody in the same direction.
Yeah.
And here as well, when they're building a unifying vision, there are about 7 skills that people need to really go back and have.
Okay.
The first piece of it, especially when it is a small organization, like an entrepreneur with less than 30 employees, they need to focus much more on why they built their business. What are their values? What is their vision? What is their purpose? So that is where the things come. It becomes very important for especially the entrepreneur and the business owner to come up with those things, because they're small and they have very few number of people and they're just following along the vision of the CEO or the entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And then basically once you're almost 35, 40 employees, you have some managers you have hired from outside. You brought in some professional managers who have been there, done that. Then you can go back and bring a teamwork and clarify the values, mission, vision as a team. So that is a big difference. We go back and look at it. And the second piece of it is the entrepreneur, when they're small, they really know what is the future in store for them. They're thinking about, they call it futuristic thinking, is where do they want to take the organization? What do they really want to do in the future?
Yeah.
Because it is not about today, it is about the future as well. So the futuristic thinking is very, very important. And as the organization is growing, now they need to have the listening skills to go back and listen to their stakeholders as well.
Okay.
Because they need to listen to their employees, their leaders, sometimes their customers, advisors, whoever they may be. So start getting some of those inputs into them. As and when the company is growing, the number of people increase, bringing in the stakeholders becomes very, very important in building that unifying vision.
Yeah.
And the next part of it is collaboration. Really, they need to go back and learn with and work with the people. They might have some direct reports whom they need to collaborate. It might be some external factors, suppliers. Again, stakeholders is the word I always use. Is how do you collaborate with all of them so that everybody understands the vision piece of it?
Yeah.
And then basically a couple of other things that is for the vision to be really good, they need to lead by example. They need to go back and say they believe in the vision. It is not just a statement they're making and then it is something you put on a wall and forget about it.
Absolutely.
And the last piece of it will be the adaptability piece of it. Are you comfortable? Are you taking the inputs and stuff and really modifying and changing as required?
Yeah.
And that is going to be part of it. And these are some of the things when the entrepreneur and the leader start going back and incorporating into building and unifying vision for the organization.
Yeah, I've been a part of an organization where theoretically the leadership team was tasked with kind of defining the vision almost separate from the senior leader in the organization. And it just didn't work. It's got to be a collaboration. It can't be, because then ultimately what happened is the senior leader just kind of kept doing what they had always done and followed the same vision they had always followed. And the rest of the organization outside of the leadership team saw this and said, well, I hear the leadership team talking about these core values and these principles, and this is how we're going to market, and this is what we're doing. But the senior leader isn't saying that. And so now there's confusion, right? And it's like, what are we doing? And it just doesn't work. So yeah, there's got to be a collaboration. And I think the coaching process is such a great process to kind of pull out the ideas from your team, to be able to ask questions and be the last one to say anything instead of stating what you think and then saying, what do you guys think? Right.
Yes.
After that, you've already ruined it, right? You've already spoiled the moment. And so using those skills to get that collaboration, I think is huge. And it's something you have to learn. I mean, you have to discipline yourself to most entrepreneurs aren't going to be walking around saying, so what do you think? What do you guys think we should do? They're like, I already know what I want to do. I know how I want to do it. And I just need you guys to get on board.
Exactly.
And so it's a growth curve and it's a growth opportunity. And like you said, but it happens over time as the organization grows. It needs to happen more and more. But I think there is some time to grow into that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Drew, one of the things I noticed talking and working with so many entrepreneurs over the year, when they're small, they really don't pay attention to the vision piece of it. They don't pay attention to the purpose piece of it. And one of the things I always tell people is that helps you set the direction of your company from a mid to long-term perspective.
Yeah.
And it helps you to make the right decisions, because decision making is very important when you're growing an organization, scaling an organization. So whoever takes the time to be the vision, it may not be 100% right, but at least directionally 70, 80% you're comfortable with it. That's okay. You can keep on working on it and refining it. But it sets your tone for the mid to long-term range, and it really helps you to make the right decisions. So that's the reason why I encourage even one person, if they know what their vision is, if their purpose is, it really helps them to make the right decision. So that's the reason why it is so important.
Yeah. Well, it's like going down the road and saying, hey, do you think we should get on the I-30 or should we get on the 820? Well, I don't know. Where are we going, right? Where are we going? It depends on where we're going. And so if I don't know where we're going, then we can go to either direction. It really doesn't matter because we're just going for a road trip, apparently.
Exactly.
But yeah, we have limited resources in the real world. And so we have to make sure that our energy and effort is going towards a cohesive vision and direction as an organization, so that we're not wasting time or resources.
Yes.
Beautiful.
And the third point is very, very important. How do you translate that vision into a clear strategy? Yeah. And this is where execution comes. This is where the rubber meets the road. And like Ram Charan and Larry Bossidy, they wrote a book called basically Execution. Yeah. And then it says basically 70% of the organizations fail to execute very well on their goals and vision. See, their whole concept and research was you bring in some smart people, they'll help you to come up with a vision, but that is only 20, 30% of it. 70% is rubber meeting the road. How do you go back and make it?
Well, and I just watched a Forbes interview on YouTube last week, and this guy that did an extensive research on entrepreneurs said that the vast majority of the entrepreneurs that we think of when we think of big time entrepreneurs, they are not well equipped to execute. They need help or they need systems in place to help them do that. They're big idea people. And so it is a skill that you have to learn, and systems and processes can help. But I'm curious to see what you have to say about execution. How do we create that execution strategy?
There's several different aspects. In fact, I was coaching somebody this morning and talking to them, and this was all about developing a global product management team.
Okay.
And in 45 minutes, I could go back and say, hey, you're setting this great vision for your department, but you can't execute with what it is. And you cannot go deliver the value, what you have delivered, because I see these gaps and stuff. And in 1 hour, we could go back and review the details. And she said, you know what, I really need to go to the drawing board and either ask for more resources or I need to reduce the expectations for the year. Wow. And it was very, very powerful and a very, very important session for her because this was a role she just got into.
That's good.
Yeah. So she's right on track, at least looking at things and working on those to make it happen.
Yeah. Well, a greater awareness of, the current reality. And that's all we can do is work
Exactly.
with the current reality that we find ourselves in. We can wish that it was something different, but that just isn't the real world. We have to deal with the current reality. So,
Yes. So one of the things is whenever you're trying to take your vision into a clear strategy, there is always some pre-planning required. People
okay.
miss the pre-planning piece of it. One thing, because they have already been in business for 6 months, 1 year, they need to have some sort of an handle on the customer feedback. How are the customers looking at our products and services? We need to get some of that feedback from them. Then the second part of it is we need to understand feedback from our employees. How are they feeling? What are their challenges? What are their opportunities? So those two things can be done. And the third piece, which is very important, is some market research and what are the changes happening in the market.
Okay.
So that is the pre-planning piece of it, where some time and effort has to be done even before you come up with a clear strategy.
Gotcha.
And then you go into the planning session for it. And now you can go back and use this 6-step methodology once you have that. The first thing is we always want to clarify and say, what are our values? What is our mission? What is our vision? Because that sets the tone and the direction for it. And all of this information, what we got from the customers, employees, make sure you get the right stakeholders involved and share all of that information with everybody. Communicate very effectively to go back and view them where we are today.
Yeah.
And then the next part of it is go back and do a baseline or assess the current state. Something like a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Okay.
And the third piece, which I have been looking at it for the last 6-7 years, is the trend analysis. What is happening in the world? What is happening in the market? And how will that affect us? Especially if you're looking at it from a 2 to 3 year, 5-year point of it. Like this year, in the last 6 months, ChatGPT totally changed everything.
100%. Yeah, that totally changed everything. Or even the last year, interest rates. If you are in an industry where you regularly borrow money, you're in manufacturing and you're borrowing money to create your product so you can sell it, your interest rates are you have to factor that in. You can't just put your head in the sand and say, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. No, those are factors that you have to consider.
Yes, very, very huge, very big. Once you look at all these 3 things, based on that, you start identifying what is our competitive advantage based on the direction, based on all of those things. So you might look at some weaknesses, look at what are some of your strengths, and then you go back and build some strategic objectives and initiatives around your competitive advantage.
Okay.
And once you go back and identify whatever the strategic initiatives are, now you go back and create execution plans for these prioritized strategic initiatives. Then you go back and say, who is going to be leading this? Whose name is on that? Who is the champion for it? Who are the team members?
Yeah.
That is going to be there so that we get the accountability, we get the metrics, we get everything aligned. And when these 3 to 5 or 7 initiatives that we go back and focus on and execute, pretty much we go back and translate our vision into a strategy and meet our goals.
I love it. It's just that easy, isn't it, Raj?
Yes.
That simple. And that's the 20-30%, right? But you have to walk it out, you have to execute, and you have to make your strategy, your strategic plan has to be front and center. It has to be visible, where you see it, where you continue to make it a focal point of the organization. It's the same thing. I do a lot of communication training. We do DISC. We're both DISC certified, and it's a great framework.
Yes.
But if you don't make it a priority for the organization, then nobody uses it and nobody understands. I was just talking to a person today, and they were asked recently, what's your DISC style? And they said, oh, I'm an advocate. And they said, that's not a DIS or C, And this individual remembered the term that it gave for the specific style, SIC in this case, and that popped out as the advocate style in the specific DISC assessment. But this person didn't remember anything else about DISC, right? And so that's all that stuck. Well, yeah, because they hadn't talked about it in a year. What do you expect? If you haven't talked about it in a year, you're not going to remember it. We train it. Of course, we should remember it. but a
Yes.
person that just finds out about it in one day of training doesn't know. And the same thing is true. You can take and you can do a 3-day offsite and say, man, we all got it now. We're all on the same page. And 2 weeks later, half the stuff or more, nobody will remember.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and because the day to day. And so that's part of the responsibility. There's got to be a driver. There's got to be someone that's taking ownership and leading that initiative in the organization. And as an entrepreneur, that's going to be your responsibility to make that important for the organization, make it a priority.
Yeah. So I have two examples I want to share on that piece of it.
Yes,
2011, basically, we, along with a friend, created a great program called Career Coaching for Students.
Okay.
That was a great program. Both my kids and some of my friends' kids, all of them got great benefit out of it. All of them, fast forward to today, great careers, great things, everything hunky-dory. But you know what? We could never go back and see because we never paid attention to the customer feedback. We just went with our own sample size. And after 11 months, we did not even sell a single account beyond the circle. So for us, we wasted 11 months on a product. We know the product was good, but for whatever reason, it was there. So 11 months of effort went down the drain.
Yeah.
And recently, even 3-4 years ago, we had a different product called Business Growth Alliance. It was for the startup 1%, 2% kind of a thing. And we had some initial success because of the people we knew and the influence we could do and everything else. But after that, it was so difficult to go back and do it. So that basically, we had to go back and stop that as well. So those were two very big lessons, which I learned from my own experience and from my business. I have several other examples from my clients as well. And that's the reason why the execution is so critical. Is if you don't take the pre-planning piece of it and really go through all the analysis of it and really plan properly for that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's very few vocations where you can just prescribe what to do, right? Like doctors can give a prescription and say, take this medicine, do this, and you'll get well. And maybe auto mechanics, right? They can say, this is the problem with the car. But the rest of us, we have to say, what do you want? What are you looking for, and create the solution around it. And people have to feel a part of that really to buy those products and those services. So pay attention to the feedback you're getting. It's huge.
Yes, very, very big. And now the fourth step, we had the influence, then we had the vision. Now you have a strategy to execute. Now, once we have those three things, what is the critical piece of it?
Watch out for the next episode to learn more about rest of the leadership best practices for maximum impact. If you have any questions, write to us at advisor@vrt9.com.